Before I state the key evidence-based facts that make a clear case for complete suspension of these emergency use authorisation vaccines, it's important to appreciate the key psychological barrier as to why these facts have not been acknowledged by policymakers and taken up by the UK mainstream media. That psychological phenomenon is willful blindness. This is when human beings, including in this case institutions, turn a blind eye to the truth in order to feel safe, reduce anxiety, avoid conflict, and protect their prestige and reputations. There are numerous examples of this occurring in recent history, such as at the BBC with Jimmy Savile, the Department of Health and mid-staffs, Hollywood and Harvey Weinstein, and specifically in the medical establishment, the OxyContin scandal, which was portrayed in the mini-series Dope Stick. What's crucial to understand is that the longer willful blindness to the truth continues, the more unnecessary harm it creates. It's interesting that only a couple of weeks ago I was interviewed by a journalist from a major news outlet who said that he was being bombarded by calls from people who said that they were vaccine harmed but unable to get the support they wanted from the NHS. And he also said that he thought this would be the biggest scandal in the medical history in this country. And disturbingly, he also said that if he were to mention that in the newsroom in which he worked, he would fear that he would lose his job. And it is this conspiracy of silence that we need to break. So here are the cold, hard facts on the mRNA vaccines and an explanation of the structural drivers that continue to be barriers to doctors and the public receiving independent information to make informed decisions about these vaccines. Since the rollout in the UK of the BioNTech Pfizer mRNA vaccine, we've had almost 500,000 yellow card reports of adverse effects from the public. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is unprecedented and is more than all the yellow card combined reports of the last 40 years. Such an extraordinary rate of side effects, which are beyond mild, have been reported in many countries across the world that have used the Pfizer vaccine, including, of course, the United States. Of course, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank him for giving way. I spoke to the honourable gentleman beforehand. He knows my feelings about the vaccines. I'm a supporter of the vaccines. Many of my family are as well. But I understand where the honourable gentleman comes from. I've had some constituents who have come to me. And does the honourable gentleman agree we need to ensure in this House we acknowledge risks and don't simply relegate them to fine print?
It's absolutely right that those who feel they've been damaged by the vaccine should, of course, have the full support of their elected members of Parliament and, of course, the full support of the NHS. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's instructive to note that traditionally, according to pharmacovigilance analysis, when it comes to serious adverse effects, what is actually reported by the public is thought to be only represent 10% of the true rate of serious adverse events occurring within the population. The gold standard of understanding the benefit and harm of any drug comes from the randomised controlled trial. It's the randomised controlled trial conducted by Pfizer that led to the UK and international regulators approving the BioNTech Pfizer mRNA vaccine in the first place for administration. Contrary to popular belief, that original trial of approximately 40,000 participants did not show any statistically significant reduction in death as a result of vaccination, but it did show a 95% relative risk reduction in the development of infection against the ancestral, more lethal strain of the virus. However, the absolute risk reduction for an individual was only 0.84%. In other words, from their own data, Pfizer revealed that you needed to vaccinate 119 people to prevent one infection. The World Health Organization and the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges have previously stated and made it clear that it's an ethical responsibility that medical information is communicated to patients in absolute benefit and absolute risk terms. This is to protect the public from unnecessary anxiety and manipulation. Very quickly, through mutations of that original strain, indeed within a few months, fortunately, it became far less lethal. And it quickly became apparent that there was no protection against infection from the vaccine at all. And we were left with the hope that perhaps these vaccines would protect us from serious illness and death. So what does the most reliable data tell us about the best case scenario of individual benefit from the vaccine against dying from COVID-19? Real-world data from the UK during the 3-month wave of Omicron at the beginning of this year reveals that you'd need to vaccinate 7,300 people over the age of 80 to prevent one death. The number needed to be vaccinated to prevent a death in any younger age group was absolutely enormous.
Will you give way?
I will, of course, give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way and for bringing this debate to the House. It's a very important debate that we should be having. He's just talking there about the relative risks for different cohorts of the population. He will remember that when the vaccine was first announced, the intention was that it would only be used for those who were vulnerable and the elderly, because, as he says, the expectation was that the benefit to younger people was minor. Do you think it would be helpful? Does he agree with me that it would be helpful for the Minister to explain to us why the original advice that the vaccines would only be rolled out for the older population and would not be used for children in particular, why that original advice was laid aside and we ended up with a rollout for the entire population, including children?
I thank my honourable friend, the member for Devizes, for that intervention and his support on this very important issue. Of course, it's important that the government justify why they're rolling out a vaccine to any cohort of people, in particular our children. He will recall in the Westminster Hall debate that we questioned the validity of vaccinating children